Hi there, welcome to the Johnny Jenkins Show for a brand new term, a brand new year, and what a crazy 6 months it's been. It's been a bit of a while since I've been here chatting to you on Facebook and Twitter, but it's great to be back. It's great to see you, and we've got a very special show lined up today. It's the political panel as we kick off this academic year with representatives of Warwick Labour, Warwick Conservatives and Warwick Lib Dem. They're all here to discuss the hot issues of the week, and I suppose of the past few months. There's so much for us to get our teeth into. Now, I would have loved to be joining you in a studio today. Of course, you can see it's all a bit makeshift here. We're just working at Raw to make sure everything is perfect and ready to go in a few weeks' time, and we really look forward to bringing it all back onto the radio. But here we are on Facebook, on Twitter, for quite a discussion. And before we bring in the panel, I was awoken this morning by my 8 a.m. alarm, which is the radio of good morning, it's 8 o'clock, and Donald Trump has coronavirus. And I'll tell you what, it sort of shot me to life this morning. I was quite surprised. It's a massive news story. And the first thing I thought was when Boris Johnson had coronavirus, and how that escalated from him just having the virus but working from home and being okay, to being a bit more ill, to being in hospital, to being in intensive care. It all seemed to escalate up. And now we're seeing another world leader, the leader of the free world, just over a month away from the presidential election, with coronavirus. So it's quite the story. And because of that, we need to bring in our head of news, Enoch Makungu, who joins me now. Enoch, hello.
Hello.
Did you have a nice summer?
I had a very, very busy summer getting everything ready for this term, but it was fun preparing to come back to university, I suppose. Yeah.
And is it nice to be back? Are you in Leamington? Are you in Coventry?
I am back in Leamington. I'm finally. God, it's nice to finally get out of my family's house and get away from all the squabbling, get back to the good old fashioned squabbling with roommates instead. It's been a nice change of pace.
How's it all going with the house or the flat or whatever? Is it all going okay?
Well, it's been a bit of a mess. Tara & Co has let us down time and time again.
Thanks for calling Tara & Co.
Yeah. Hopefully they're not watching this, and so...
Well, hopefully not, and I'm sure they're brilliant, and of course other estate agents around there. So, Enoch, this story, I'm assuming it gave you quite the shock as it did to me. Why don't you take this opportunity to tell us what we know?
Oh, well, this story completely threw me for a loop. So what we know so far is there are two possible ways Donald Trump got coronavirus. One way is... Rona Romney, the current chancellor, the current chairwoman of the Republican Party, she caught coronavirus and she was with Donald Trump last Friday. But the most likely way is that Donald Trump, a senior White House aide, Hope Hicks, who's been working with Donald Trump in his debate prep and traveled with him to the debate on Tuesday, with several other senior members of staff and several of the Trump family, tested positive for coronavirus on Thursday morning. By Thursday night, Donald Trump was being tested. But even though had been tested, he still went out and traveled to several different campaign rallies. Well, on that day he went to one. He only went to one, but he went several the day before. And it came out this morning that Donald Trump is now positive for coronavirus.
As is his wife, the First Lady, Melania Trump.
Yeah.
So we think Hope Hicks, one of the advisors, maybe the sort of, there's the person who may have passed it around, and we know they were in a helicopter together the other day, weren't they?
Yeah.
So what impact does this have on politics in America and on the election?
Well, this is an understatement of the year, but it changes everything. Donald Trump, his weakest area has always been his handling of coronavirus, which many Americans can be very critical of, and he's now the living symbol of his failure to manage it. He spent months integrating wearing masks, taking appropriate measures, and now he's paying the price. I can't see how it's helped him in the polls, especially since he's very so far behind, and the debate didn't help him already.
Let's just quickly touch on that debate the other day, and I know we've spoken about it on our preview on social media. But we had Donald Trump, who interrupted, was it 70 times or something, and Joe Biden, who I think was trying to compete with Donald Trump and trying to do a bit of the interrupting, but he seemed out of his depth to me. Donald Trump was exactly how we expected he was going to be. Do you think that would have changed anyone's minds?
Well, I think the instant reaction we saw after the debate and saw the polling we've seen afterwards seems to have led heavily towards Biden. I think what we've seen is that for over 4 years, Donald Trump's been sort of separated from the majority of American people who aren't online, aren't on Twitter, through the American media who sort of sanitized him a bit. And now he's back out there doing debates. People are going, oh, wait, that guy is my president. And people don't like it when they see Trump acting like that way. It may appeal to his base, but it doesn't have that much appeal further than that.
It's interesting, and I know obviously this is something we'll discuss more. And Raw, of course, we're doing loads for the presidential election. But in the meantime, Raw News, there's loads of shows and things that people can get involved in. Perhaps a freshers watching this, Enoch, that wants to get involved for the first time.
Oh, well, obviously we have the Johnny Jenkins Show. You can come on that if you want. But also, we have the main. I mean, I've heard mixed reviews. We have. We have the main news show every Monday, Insight, where we get people from all, any Yorkshire universities that could come on and give their opinion on the big events of the week, either on campus or off campus. We have a podcast we're going to do focused on the US election, building up to our US election overnight on the night of November 3rd. So join the Raw Facebook group and get involved. That's
the way to do it. Okay, Enoch Makungu, head of news, great to see you, and I'm sure we'll speak very soon. Okay, we say goodbye there to Enoch Makungu, who is our head of news at Raw, and we move into the bit you've been waiting for, our political panel. Now, as you know, here on the Johnny Jenkins Show, we have every Friday, 3 o'clock, that's the time. You've set your alarm, I know. We get people from all across Warwick to come on and talk about the big issues of the week. But I thought, seeing as we are here, the first week of term, the first week of a brand new year, what a great introduction to the politics at Warwick and the politics of the world. By introducing the Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat Society. And we've got representatives from the three main parties on campus here with us today to chew over some of the big issues of the week. Let's first bring in the chair of the Conservative Association at Warwick, Jacob Jefferson. Jacob, hi, great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, all good here, thank you. And did you have a nice summer?
Yeah, it was good. I've been back in Leamington for a month now, so I've kind of made up for lost time that I lost in term 3 a bit. No, I had a good summer. Yeah.
And what was it like being back here, being back in Leamington before everyone else was here? I mean, I've just got back in the past week, but quite a few people came back pretty early.
Yeah, I think having been stuck at home for 5 months or whatever, I think I just wanted to come back, see my friends, and go out for a few drinks with them, having not been able to for so long.
I did that last night, and then the 10 o'clock curfew came around. It was the first time I'd actually experienced it.
It was lucky. The first few weeks didn't have as many of these regulations in September, so we managed to stay out a bit later. But yeah, I haven't really been out much since the 10 p.m. rule because I kind of feel like it's kind of pointless. But
it sort of felt like my night hadn't finished. Like I went for a meal, went for a few drinks, and then there it was 10 o'clock, and hushed out the door. It was like, what am I supposed to do for the rest of the night? Anyway, Jacob, it's great to see you. And before we bring in our other parties, just a pretty broad question for you. How do you think the Conservatives have been doing this summer?
Look, it's this kind of unprecedented times. It was always going to be very difficult for the party, especially having won that big majority. Kind of thought it would be plain sailing for the next 4.5 years, and be back in government for another 5 years after that. But clearly, this is an incredibly tough time. I think if everyone's being honest, they haven't dealt with it fantastically, especially in terms of their messaging. The rules are quite complicated. As we saw the other day, Boris Johnson didn't even know his own rules with it's about how many people you can meet in the outdoors in the northeast. As I said, this it's a very difficult time. I don't think if she was on the other side, if it was Labour in government, I don't think they'd be doing particularly well either. But clearly, if we're looking at the polls, they've tightened really. There was one poll which had Labour in front, but I think the general trend in the polls seems to be the Conservatives just ahead, but only just. And I think we kind of have a big challenge on our hands, especially as looking at other areas like Brexit, where it's come up again and kind of annoyed a few people, and making a few more divisions in the party. So I don't think it's been a particularly great summer for the Conservative Party, but I don't know what else they could have done really in most of these circumstances.
And Brexit just feels so sort of minuscule, doesn't it, compared to coronavirus? And it was that topic that dominated our lives, and here we are with Corona, and it just feels like nothing.
Yeah, I think it puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Obviously there was a lot of drama with the internal markets bill, but I don't think that had the cut through to the wider public like coronavirus did, or like last year's Brexit things did.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you mentioned the North East. It seems to be an area of contention for the government. Not only did we have that drama the other day where the minister and then Boris Johnson couldn't work out the rules. When I think of the North East, I just think of Durham and all of that saga, but I'm sure maybe that's something we'll talk about later on. Jacob, it's great to see you. And thanks for being here. Let's bring in Will Lamb, who is the treasurer at Labour. Will, hi, it's great to see you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, we're all good here. Great to be back. And your summer, was it good?
It was decent. It felt like Groundhog Day a few times, like not being able to go out anywhere and having to just kind of repeat the day every single day. But I think you just adapt to the new circumstances and you kind of just get on with your life. And yeah, it's been nice to be back, especially the last 2 weeks, getting to see people I haven't seen for like 6 months at this point. So yeah, it's been really nice.
Yeah, I think for me, when I've seen my friends, it almost feels like you didn't have that 6 months away, and it just felt so normal straight away. I don't know about you,
Yeah,
but it's good to take the opportunity to socialise ahead of term, really starting on Monday.
yeah. I mean, it's striking a balance between obviously socializing, but obviously being aware of the rules and being aware of that like coronavirus is still around and rising in a lot of parts of the country. So it's just striking that balance, I think.
And how comfortable do you feel when you're out and about? Does it depend on the people you're with, where you're at?
Yeah, I think I usually have been avoiding pubs, or if I am going to one, I stay outside. Um, and obviously just wearing a mask all the time. I think the UK needs to be 100% better on wearing masks because other countries are far ahead of where we are right now. But yeah, again, it's about striking that balance. You can't be scared to go outside, but you've just got to take like precautionary measures.
And let's talk about Labour, because it's been quite the summer for the party. We started with this leadership election at the start of the year after Labour's real failure, I think it's fair to say, in December of 2019. And this election went on for ages and ages. And eventually Sir Keir Starmer became the Labour Party leader. Yet he still hasn't spoken to an audience with people in it. He's always speaking to a camera or screens just because of Corona. Tell me, Will, your thoughts on Keir Starmer as Labour leader. Do you think he's doing a good job?
So I personally didn't vote for him in the Labour leadership election.
Who did you vote for?
Rebecca Long-Bailey. But obviously, I think as any member, you've got to give him time to obviously flesh out his own ideas. But I think some people, especially on the left wing part of the party, have felt disappointed with a lot of the things he's been doing towards such things as like Black Lives Matter and the statements he put out towards that. Also, just some of the party policies on renters and coronavirus and not kind of pushing the government as far as he should be doing, especially with how the government has handled coronavirus so far. So it's mixed. I think we have to like allow him to obviously have his own strategy and kind of his own goals for what he wants to do with the leadership. But I think we also have to scrutinize and like tell him to his face when he's doing something wrong. And I think the left are growing impatient, but we've just got to make sure that we find ways within the party that we can like basically tell him what we want and our kind of policies that we want him to put forward.
There's quite a few things to pick up on there, really. With Black Lives Matter, he called it, did he call it a moment? The Black Lives Matter moment, and that really caused quite some contention. Rebecca Long-Bailey, the person you voted for, well, he kicked her out of his shadow cabinet, didn't he, some months ago now, for sharing an article by Maxine Peake, which had some anti-Semitic comments in it, or certainly part of it was deemed that way by the Labour leader. Do you feel, I assume as someone towards the left of the party, if you lend your support to Rebecca Long-Bailey, that he's doing enough to keep your vote at the next election?
I think at the moment, because of the first past the post system in the UK, I think I would be voting for Labour. But I do think that I think Labour has got to look at the report that came out addressing the 2019 election, and they've got to realise that Labour have to, first of all, keep the people that voted for Labour in 2019. Like 10 million people voted for Labour. And Keir Starmer, I can see what his strategy is. It's to obviously win back a lot of votes that he lost in 2019. But he's first of all got to secure the votes of the people that did actually stick with Labour in 2019, which were mostly young people, people of colour, and not suburban, and city voters. So he can't just go after one group of people and leave the other group behind. So it's, again, striking a balance.
It's a broad church and you've got to have people from all sides. Well, Will, it's great to see you, and thanks ever so much for being on the show with us today. And we talk now to the Liberal Democrats and the communications director at Warwick Lib Dems, Rose Buxton, who joins me now, and I'm hoping we've got a connection with you, Rose. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm hoping that you can see and hear me.
I can hear you, and that is the main thing. I mean, we're not always matching up, but look, we are here in 2020. We're having to learn how to use all of this equipment, and it's great to see you. Talk to me about your summer, Rose. Did you have a good break?
I had a very good break. I think I've lost all concept of time at this point. It's very weird thinking that we've been doing this since March. I think my bragging right has been that I had to go into self-isolation about a week before lockdown was called. So I'm saying I've technically been doing this a week longer than everyone else, is my current claim to fame.
So tell me about that. Why did that happen?
Oh, it was a member of my family was showing symptoms. So we ended up having to kind of do the 2 weeks. And then about a week afterwards, the lockdown was immediately called. So it became slightly redundant, but
yeah, well, I think I might be able to do you one up on them, because a few weeks before that, I had all the symptoms, and the advice at the time was, well, unless you've come back from Italy or Wuhan or whatever, then you're okay. Go and live your life. So I went out. I saw people. I felt very ill. I felt like death at one point. And I mean that. I felt very, very ill. But there I was. I may have been the Warwick super spreader. Anyway. It's great to see you, Rose. Talk to me about the Liberal Democrats then, because
the back of your mind it was, well, it might not be corona, it might just be.
Well, that's it, isn't it? There's a bit of a delay, but I can hear you. That's it, because
we did, yes.
I never had a test. I never, none of that ever happened. You've got a new leader. This leadership election of yours was between Layla Moran and Ed Davey. And Sir Ed Davey is seen as, I suppose, someone that's been acting leader before, a bit more of the same. Layla Moran was maybe a bit more exciting, a bit, something different for Lib Dems, but he won a bit of a landslide for your party. Did you support him in the campaign, and what do you think of him so far?
I have to say, I did not support him. I was quite a big Layla supporter, because I've always seen myself on kind of more of the left of the party. And I think Ed kind of tends to represent kind of more of like the centre stability, kind of Nick Clegg section. But so far, I've actually been very pleasantly surprised by how he's got started. I think the general party discipline and kind of actually opposing the government on things like corona legislation and on things like the Migrations Bill, I've been very impressed, and I think he's charted a very good course with that. And I was also very pleasantly surprised by his first conference speech, because I liked a lot of it. I thought kind of the way he expressed his back, thought kind of painted a certain vision for things like the care system and things that are so fundamentally broken in this country. That I think so far he's got the experience and the campaigning chops to hopefully do.
Okay, well, I seem to have lost a bit of connection with you there, Rose, but it does seem we have someone that's perhaps a little bit more enthusiastic about their party leader than the other two I might have spoken to. Well, let's bring everybody in. So we've got Rose from the Lib Dems, we've got Will from Labour, and Jacob from the Conservatives. And here we are all on the screen having a great time together. Let's talk about university, because a couple of weeks ago now, the student union said we'd quite like everything to be online. And I did an interview with Megan Clark and the education officer, and we spoke at length about this. And she pretty much told me that it was safer for us to be at home, be in our accommodation, but to be learning online. Here we are on campus, academic stuff about to start on Monday. And it seems, certainly for me at least, some of it is in person. Jacob, coming to you first from the Conservatives, do you think it was right for the SU to suggest that things should be moved online?
The way they did it, absolutely not. They didn't, obviously, as everyone knows, they didn't even consult any students. I think the way they promoted this was really poorly. Was pretty poorly done. I think it was. I think you could see from the comments on the posts and lots of, there was a petition which got about 500 signatures or something. That I think most students want in-person teaching, and there was a poll in the ball which showed that as well. But the fact that they didn't even consult people, I think was really, really, really disappointing. And I think, to be honest, I think it's sort of, I know the SUs are struggling with all the virtual stuff, but I think it's sort of symbolic of, I think so far people aren't very impressed with this current SU team.
And Will from Labour, they say it's safer, we had to act quickly. Is that something you support?
I do actually support it, and that's because they weren't just acting on the advice of like themselves or a small group of people. They're actually acting on the advice of Warwick UCU, and also a lot of reports from like the BMJ and Sage Advice that has said that it is safer to be doing online teaching. Like we have already seen in Manchester and Glasgow already outbreaks in student accommodation, and the first thing that the SU has got to do is protect students' safety and health, and wider than that, Warwick UCU has to protect its staff. So I think that in the current climate that we're living in, online teaching has to be the only way we really can go. And I even though obviously there are going to be some students that are disgruntled, I don't think it's the SU that they should be directing their anger towards. I think it should be the wider university management, that we haven't had enough information from the university throughout the 6 months since March, and they haven't put in measures or enough measures in place to make it safe or make it accessible for disabled students to get taught online. So I think I understand the anger, but I think the SU is the wrong place to direct it. I think there are other avenues to direct that anger.
And do you, Will, think that going onto campus would risk compromising your health?
In certain circumstances, yes. I do think that, because I'm an engineer, so obviously I've got labs that I'd have to go to. But I just think that in these circumstances, having 5,000 new freshers plus thousands more second years, third years, and postgrads coming onto campus together is just a recipe for disaster. And I know that it's terrible for all of us. All of us want to be meeting lecturers, meeting tutors, but we've got to realize the situation that we're in at the moment, and things can't go back to normal. And it's on the university to actually come up with the online teaching and make it accessible for disabled students, make it accessible for all students, in fact, so that people aren't as disgruntled.
Jacob, your response?
I agree that a lot of criticism should be put towards the university as well. I've seen, looking at Welcome Week, for example, I've seen lots of other universities, they've been able to do lots of things in person, socially distanced. The university hasn't even made any effort to do so. We saw with the shambles that was the Sports and Societies Fair, that, when stuff had been online as a substitute for in-person stuff, they've been terrible as well. So I think obviously the university have deserve a lot of criticism as well, but the university are the ones who are actually still trying to do in-person teaching. Obviously there are safety reasons, but if everything's socially distanced, as it can be, I don't see any reason why we can't do it. I think if someone's sitting in front of a screen all day, I think it's really demoralizing. As people have said, how bad it can be for the mental health. If it's possible, and I think it is, socially distanced, then I don't see why we can't do it.
You mentioned something going wrong at the Societies Fair. Now, obviously, I don't run a society, but you do, Jacob. Tell me what happened.
Well, I think people the freshers didn't seem to know about it. I don't think it was very publicised. I'm sure people could make a joke that no one wants to come to the Conservative Society anyway. But in terms of the numbers compared to last year that we have in terms of members signing up, people coming to speak to us is incredibly low. And speaking to most other societies as well, it was really badly done. It took about 4 or 5 clicks to go through lots of different places to even get to speak to a society. And I think most people aren't that it was just a chat as well. Some societies, as we did put a link to a stream where you could talk to us. But I think people would much rather talk to you in person. And I've seen lots of universities who have done in-person societies fairs. They only had one person on the stand, and you've had to wear a mask, and it's sort of semi-outdoors in a tent or something, but they still managed to do it. And it's really disappointing. It's not just my society who struggling to engage with people at the moment. I think it's, from what I've heard, it's most societies who have struggled to get members or even find their audience that they think would join the society.
Yeah, matching students up to societies and for them to find the ones they like. Let's bring in Rose from the Lib Dems. Your thoughts, Rose, on the SU's, I can't see you, but I hope we can hear you. Your thoughts on the SU's demands, really, that university gets moved online? No, it doesn't look like Rose is there. What a shame. Will, do you think that actually, you know, given everything that's gone on, given Corona, the uni is really just trying to make things fair, just trying to get some bits online, some in person, maybe strike a bit of a balance? Do you think actually, given the benefit of the doubt, they're doing a good job?
I disagree with you there. Sorry, Johnny. But I
don't
do
have
think...
any thoughts. I mean, I'm just suggesting things, Will.
I think that the university has been known in previous years to not be very good at liaising with the SU, and I think it's just continued throughout this coronavirus. They've been poor with their organization, and I think really they've kind of deceived. I mean, like a lot of other universities around the country, they've deceived a lot of students. A lot of students thought they were coming to Warwick to get kind of a very like authentic student experience, and they're now just locked in their rooms, locked in their flats with 6 strangers practically. And I think we have to ask the larger question about like how universities are run, and also about the cost of tuition fees. Like, this can't just be an isolated incident. I mean, students are effectively paying £9,000 this year for just a streaming service. So I think, yeah, it's definitely a wider conversation. I would say, though, that even though there are disgruntled students that want that face-to-face teaching, there are also a lot of students that are terrified and don't even want to kind of venture outside at the moment because they're worried that they'll catch it. So I think there are people on both sides. It might just be there's a vocal minority at the moment that are saying one thing, and we're not hearing from like the others, basically. You mentioned tuition fees, so it seems like a good chance to try the Lib Dems one more time. Rose, fingers crossed that Rose is there. It says she's, Rose, we can see you. Wow, how exciting. Your thoughts about SU saying uni should be online, Rose? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I'm just checking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. There's a bit of a delay, but that's fine. Your thoughts on it going online, Rose?
I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of the rhetoric kind of surrounding the whole debate, I think, has almost been fueling the situation more, because I think there's a disconnect between the people who want it to go online, who are kind of assuming that people who want all in person are kind of advocating, you know, crowded seminary, no math, exactly how it was before. Whereas I think the people who are kind of advocating for all in person, there's a conception that they don't seem to fully realise the risk. And I think a lot of that rhetoric is why we've ended up kind of in this situation where whatever happens, a lot of people are going to be very, very angry. I think the best way was, in my opinion, was always going to be to have some kind of grid system in which we have kind of socially distanced, masked, for example, extending the timetable so we can kind of have more people, more rooms running, but with some kind of way to connect virtually on Teams, or by even kind of dialing in. Because then we have a system for where people can self-isolate if they need to, or people who are too anxious to come on campus have a way to kind of still connect and still receive their education. But at the same time, I think we're going to see very serious problems with people feeling kind of isolated and cut off when you're basically just in front of a screen.
It seems to me, Rose, that you're just keen on striking a balance, coming somewhere down the middle and having some online, some in person. Do you think that the university is doing their best? Do you think that they've responded to this crisis well?
I have to say, it doesn't look as, I think net is currently proving that there's going to be that they were already doing things online. It all seems like it was kind of thrown together at the last minute. So, for example, we found 48 hours going to be, because they'd suddenly realized we can only have kind of one stream at once. And then kind of the decisions taken about kind of teaching and online politics, we still have.
I don't. Rose, I'm not sure if I'm honest with you, this is going to work, because we're not hearing very much of what you're saying, and there's a bit of a delay. So it's such a shame, but I think we're going to have to we're going to have to leave it there with you, Rose, because the connection just isn't good enough for us to hear you, and I don't know how much you can hear me. But if you can, thanks ever so much for coming on, and perhaps next week on the show we can get you on with a better connection. I did want to hear a Lib Dem voice throughout, but I hope you understand that, and I hope you can hear me. Me saying this. Well, it's great to see you, Rose, and like I said, we'll see you again. Okay, we're hearing a yes. That's great. Sorry, Rose. Bye bye. Have a nice weekend. It felt like I was sort of, I don't know, talking through a Nokia brick or something. It wasn't quite working. Here we are with Will and Jacob, though, from Labour and the Conservatives. So we've had a little chat about that, but let's talk a bit broader about corona restrictions and how Boris Johnson is acting as Prime Minister, because it's sort of changed a bit. You mentioned, Jacob, earlier that it's been a bit confusing. Obviously, at the start, it was stay home and wash your hands, and then it was, no, actually, really stay home, don't go to work. And then it was all go out a little bit, then go out a little bit more, and then now we're being told to stay at home once again as we enter this second wave. Do you think that Boris Johnson has acted well and brought in the right restrictions at the right time?
Not particularly. The 10 p.m. rule, for example, seems to have absolutely no, base in science. As we saw, scenes after 10 p.m. where people were just gathering in the streets and not in socially distanced areas and probably spreading it even more. All it is, I think, is a middle road between the scientists who wanted to lock us down again properly, and some people in the cabinet, a bit more libertarian who didn't really want any more lockdown. But I think the strategy that they're going for now just doesn't really seem to have any end game. They keep saying we have to do this until there's a vaccine. There's absolutely no guarantee there'll be a vaccine. There's also lots of things that there are vaccines for, like the flu, which people still die of in the hundreds of thousands every year. So I really don't know what the end game is with this. Originally we went into lockdown to make sure the NHS was prepared and the NHS wasn't overwhelmed. But now the goalposts seem to have shifted in terms of what we're actually in lockdown for. And I really don't. So there was a chance there will be no vaccine. There's a chance a vaccine won't be able to won't come up for a few years. So I really don't know what their end game is.
Yeah, and not everything has a vaccine as well. There are so many things that we don't vaccinate against and we have to learn to live with. But you really say, Jacob, that this isn't sustainable. What's your solution?
I think the path that the government was going on, slowly opening up, Britain again was the right path. Clearly cases have gone up again. But if we look at hospitalizations and deaths, obviously there has been a slight increase, and we have to be wary of that and protect the people who are vulnerable. Obviously, if you do have symptoms and all that, you still have to self-isolate. But I really think the rest of the country should be starting to open up. As I said, there's lots of cases going up, and it seems to be more the young people. But as we know, young people are much less likely to get it. Much less likely to have symptoms and to be ill from it. So the hospitalizations and deaths are still quite low. They've gone up a bit, but nowhere near the trajectories. And also, the projection that Whitty and Valence gave, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, about cases doubling every week. That has not happened. The evidence shows that has not happened at all. There was a very, very slight increase. So I really think we need to look at opening up Britain, slowly, as they did in sort of May, June, July, August.
But wasn't their point that if you don't act now, Boris Johnson, cases will double? Well, he acted.
Yeah, but I'm really not sure that the actions they took are really that effective. I think statistics showed that only about 5% of new cases were coming from restaurants and bars, but that was where the most of the lockdown was. Obviously, there are local lockdowns as well. But I'm really not sure that the responses actually taken to that increase in cases actually have that much impact. And
there's a lot of questions about the success of local. I think they're not local anymore, are they? They're regional. A lot of questions about the success of regional lockdowns. Will, I'm sensing, and in a way I'm sort of hoping, that you don't agree with what Jacob has said. So we see both sides. Do you think Boris Johnson is going too far? He needs to chill out a bit and just have a bit more of a measured approach?
No, I think that the last 6 months has shown the complete incompetence of the Conservative government, and also exposed the 10 years of misrule of the coalition and then the Conservative government from 2015 to 2019. I can't describe how poor it's been. I mean, every step of the way, they've just seemed to get worse and worse. The cabinet seems to just be in disarray. Boris Johnson seems to be absent from the field of battle. Matt Hancock seems completely out of his depth. Gavin Williamson just couldn't handle a crisis and kind of made things worse with exam results. So I think across the board, the Conservative government have continually let the country down. And I think it's shown with the fact that there are 42,000 people that have died, which is just an appalling number. Like, obviously, I think everyone would agree here that it's crazy that so many people have died. And even though I get that it was obviously completely out of the blue, there are also reports that Boris Johnson knew about coronavirus weeks before it became a critical situation. And we have to remember that at the start of this whole pandemic, he was pushing, and whoever it was, Dominic Cummings, was pushing for herd immunity, and that was being broadcast in the news for the first 2-3 weeks around the end of February, start of March. So all this kind of messaging, and this has continued into the pandemic, and it's just got worse and worse and more confusing. And I think people have started to just get very confused. And what the government has then done has just started to blame the people and different groups and scapegoat them for basically their own incompetence.
Jacob, Will says pretty much everything that the Conservative government have done has been wrong.
I mean, I agree with lots of points there about the messaging about certain ministers like Gavin Williamson really messing their brief up, and with the whole exams thing. As I said, it's a global pandemic. People were going to die. From this, it happened in every country. Even New Zealand, where everyone's praised everything that's happened there, people have still died. So I don't necessarily think you're saying 40,000 people have died is, obviously it's an incredibly terrible thing, but I think blaming the government for that is if you blame every government then for every death. So I don't think they've handled this particularly well coming out of it since sort of the summer. But as I said, this is an incredibly difficult moment. And I do think the point about herd immunity, I think, is a bit newspaper gossip isn't really policy. At no point did Boris Johnson or Cummings ever say that they were going for herd immunity.
Well, I heard Patrick Vallance discuss it on the Today programme on Radio 4. That's hardly a tittle tattle in a paper, is it?
They discuss it as a potential, not as government policy.
Will, and it's a difficult question, but do you think, had a Labour government been in charge, that things would have been handled better? And I suppose ultimately that means fewer people would have died.
I think, in a way, yes. I think even though the Conservatives and the right-wing media would like to say that Jeremy Corbyn would have probably performed much worse, I don't think that's the case, because I think at its heart, a Labour government would have protected people's jobs, people's livelihoods, and
the furlough scheme. They did everything everyone asked for. Lockdown was exactly what Labour asked for and would have done. I don't think they were that out of step there.
Well, now we're seeing that furloughs being taken away far sooner than it should be. I mean, you look at Germany, France, they're extending their furlough scheme into 2021, towards the end of 2021, and we're already taking it away and replacing it with a scheme that isn't really going to help workers. I mean, once these jobs in places like the service industry and tourism are gone, they're gone. They won't come back, or they will only come back in a few years' time. So I think that we have definitely got it completely wrong compared to other countries. Obviously, it's a completely difficult situation, and no one would have performed perfectly. But I do think that Labour would have had a public health approach to the whole situation and wouldn't have done this.
What does public health mean? What does a public health approach mean?
Well, just from the Conservatives,
sort of kind of thing doesn't mean anything.
Well, no. Well, if you think of the Conservatives' approach to get people back into the workplace, that was basically because a lot of landlords, like landlords that own office space, needed their rents back. They wanted companies back in the office spaces so they could get money. It wasn't about protecting people's health. The Eat Out to Help Out, that has literally just come out in the last few days, that it didn't really help that many businesses. And it was actually shown that it was probably the significant factor of why we're having a second wave right now. I mean, I could go on for ages and ages about the amount of government mishaps that has gone on throughout this pandemic. We haven't even come on to Dominic Cummings and the whole Barnard Castle situation.
Oh, we've discussed that at length on this show before, and it feels like months ago. But my view on the Dominic Cummings fiasco, and I don't want to go over old arguments about Dominic Cummings months down the line, is that actually it was a turning point for a lot of people. I think there were two turning points in this pandemic. One was Boris Johnson getting corona, and a lot of people then taking it very seriously. And then it was Dominic Cummings driving to Durham, and maybe them turning people the other way. Well, you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn and this idea that maybe he'd have done it better, but he doesn't follow the rules. He was at a dinner party of more than 6 the other day at the start of the pandemic. He was sitting in groups of people in Portcullis House in Parliament.
Also kept going into Parliament when he was, elderly and vulnerable.
He was over 70, yeah, and that was the advice, wasn't it? Do you think, and I know it's, that you could then say, well, that you've got the SNP MP today who's, I imagine, going to resign in the next few hours, and there's all sorts of things we can say here. But do you actually think that someone like Jeremy Corbyn needs to take these rules more seriously and show people, maybe people that like him, that they are important?
Well, yeah. To be honest, I haven't seen the story about him at this dinner where there was like 8 or 9 people. I haven't seen that, but yeah, totally. Every MP should be setting an example, and it's no different for Jeremy Corbyn. It's obviously, he's got to abide by the rules as well. Like, there can't be exceptions to the rules. So I agree.
And for balance, Jacob, I must ask you about the Prime Minister's father, Stanley Johnson, who was snapped, it seemed, by quite a professional snapper.
He's a private citizen. He's not subject to the same things as elected officials are.
But he's a public figure. He is someone that's associated pretty direcly with the government, and he's also been away on holiday when it was advised against it. We don't hold Jeremy Corbyn for what his sort of mad brother does on sort of all these demonstrations. I think it's completely irrelevant what a member of the government's family member does, especially when he's his. It's not like he lives with him. It's his father, and he's doing whatever he wants. The point is, Jacob, is that it doesn't look good.
That's because people have decided to spin it in that way. I don't think I don't think what Stanley Johnson does is of any relevance to how you judge Boris Johnson.
Okay, so where do we go from here then? Because we're seeing cases have fallen in the past 2 days, certainly that I've seen, but they are still high, and they're higher than they have been in the past month. Deaths are higher than they have been. Again, not of course as high as they were at the height of the pandemic. I ask you, Will, from Labour at Warwick, are you concerned about the weeks ahead?
Yeah, completely. And that's not just for public health, but also for people's jobs and people's livelihoods. I mean, like I've mentioned before, the furlough scheme's been withdrawn way too soon. And also, the government has been too confusing with how it's giving out its guidelines with the local lockdowns. I mean, I was in a local lockdown for most of August and September before I came back to uni, and the messaging was so haphazard. It was released about 5 minutes before midnight. No one really knew what was going on, and most people were just confused and just going about their daily lives. And I think this is all, like you said, there was 2 big turning points, and the second one was Dominic Cummings. And after that, I think a lot of the public were like, well, it's one rule for some people, another rule for basically the rest of us. And I think a lot of people after that saw it as, well, if they're not going to follow the rules, then why should some of us do the same? And the government guidelines and advice has just been all over the place. I don't think anyone knows what's going on with local lockdowns. It seems like there's no consistency from one council area to another council area. And also, this is also an issue about money. I mean, the Conservative government in the last 10 years has cut up to 40% of council budgets, which has mean that councils have been severely underprepared for this pandemic. I mean, the government needs to invest money into these local economies. They say, the Conservatives go on about how they want to kind of keep the votes of these northern voters up in like the North and Yorkshire and the Northeast, but they're not actually putting the money where it needs to be right now. And they're not actually giving councils the tools to actually go about fixing a lot of the problems in their communities.
Where were you in lockdown?
I was in Greater Manchester.
And you don't think it was handled well? Is that government? Is that Andy Burnham, the Labour mayor?
I think Andy Burnham was doing his best, but to be fair to him, there was not a lot of contact from the government. I mean, I obviously follow him on Twitter, and he was saying on a daily basis that the government weren't giving him any information, and they were just going ahead. Like when the first local lockdown happened in Greater Manchester, in places like Rochdale and Oldham and Bury, he had basically not been told about it. And I think it's that kind of breakdown in communication. It's all about communication. And that breakdown in communication has led to what's been happening. I mean, the local lockdowns itself have been proven to not be useful in any way. I mean, cases in Wigan have gone up quadruple, and that's within the time they've been in local lockdown. So the whole government approach to this has been completely wrong, and I think there needs to be a total rethink right now before it could go out of control again.
Jacob, you mentioned communication a little bit earlier on, and you think the government may have made some mistakes here. Tell me what they've done wrong when it comes to communicating with the British public.
I just think the rules are a bit too complicated in lots of different places now. I think people have got a hang of it now. But when things were starting to open again and then quickly in some places go back, I think people weren't necessarily aware of them. And it was also the speed that it was, done. The notice was always very short, 1 or 2 days at least. And, I think that didn't help people at all, so I do agree that the government's messaging throughout, since July, August has been pretty poor, especially in relation to, all the new local lockdown rules they're putting in.
And some of these policies seem to have been announced, or if not announced, then leaked on Twitter. A lot of
the way that was, a lot of it was done by just telling journalists and not talking to the House first, as House of Commons first, was wrong. Lindsay Hoyle, Speaker of the House, rightly did sort of reprimand Matt Hancock for tweeting stuff before he'd even allowed to go to the House. And to be properly scrutinised in any way, which the government hasn't really been very open to any scrutiny in the Commons around their coronavirus regulations, which they really should have been.
And how do you feel, Jacob, about the weeks ahead as chair of the Conservative Association at Warwick? Do you feel comfortable when you're out and about? Are you concerned maybe that cases are alarmingly high and many of them young people? Your sort of wider thoughts on the few weeks ahead?
I feel pretty comfortable. I don't really feel at much risk of, I don't think, I feel like I, make sure I'm not in big groups, make sure I'm, when I'm in public, socially distanced, or obviously always wearing a mask. I'm not particularly concerned myself. But I also, obviously, I recognise lots of people are. It's in terms of people I'm living with, they're definitely much more concerned than I am. I was sort of very tolerant of that and make sure I follow all the things they want to do in the house. I'm not particularly worried, and I really hope that we don't go into some kind of local lockdown here, because I've been away. Obviously, I've had a month with some of my friends and all that, but I would like to sort of get back to normal uni life as best as I can, and I think it is possible. As long as people are socially distancing and not in big groups, I think it really is possible.
And if we do have a local lockdown in Warwickshire, in Coventry, will it maybe because of this party? Let's talk about this. So earlier this week at Coventry University, a party of over 200 students took place. It didn't look like a very good party to me on the videos that I saw. But it caused quite a stir locally, nationally. Lots of people were talking about it, saying students are irresponsible. It's their fault. Cases are going round. They need to open up their eyes and see the virus out there. But then there's the other side of saying, look, it's their Freshers' Week. Let students be students. Let's let them enjoy themselves. Will, where did you stand on seeing that illegal gathering?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to disagree, me and Jacob here. Yeah, it shouldn't have gone ahead. Like 200 students, it's completely reckless. Yeah, that shouldn't be going on. But I do think that students are right to be frustrated. I mean, Freshers' Week and Freshers in general is supposed to be like the best time of your life, and again, a lot of these students came into it thinking this would be the kind of situation that would be okay. But I think it's mixed. I think students have got to realize like there is a new normal right now, and they can't be organizing parties of 200. But I also do think that the government has got to be better in giving students more of a bone. The government hasn't done anything for students in the last few months. Students have basically been goaded into university. A lot of them weren't allowed to defer their years when they got their results. And I think a lot of them just feel trapped. Like they just feel like it's just a really bad situation. And I mean, putting again the tuition price tag on top of that just makes it even worse.
Do we not want to be treated like the rest of society and just be told, well, you follow the rules, we'll all do it, we'll all get through it?
Yeah, like no.
Why do they need to give us a bone if we all want to be treated the same?
Because the thing is, students and young people in general are going to face the most going to face bad conditions out of all of this. I mean, we've already gone through one massive recession 10 years ago, and now it seems like we're coming into another kind of period of like economic calamity. And I mean, you just have to look at the figures. Like young people on the housing ladder, it's just gone down continually over the last 30 years. Young people aren't earning more than their parents. It's just multiple issues with the economy, with how society works in this country. And the government hasn't done anything over the last 10 years or in the last year since they won the election to help students, or even seem that they're on the student side. And that's because it's not their voter base. They know they don't have any gain from trying to get their vote.
Jacob, did that party look like somewhere you'd like to be?
In a past world, definitely. But I sympathise those with students, and I do agree with Will that the government hasn't really shown much care about students and about their needs and their situation. And I don't necessarily think it's just because they're not the voter base, but they definitely haven't. And obviously to have a 200-person party is so massively sympathise with the desire to go and do that, but it was pretty foolish, and I'm surprised they've been able to do it. I know Warwick campus security is everywhere and monitoring what people are doing. I'm surprised that you managed to have a 200 person party. In a way, I'm impressed that they were able to actually do it without and actually go ahead. But I have loads of sympathy for students right now, and obviously I'm frustrated with the government as well in terms of the way that students have been treated particularly well in this pandemic.
What would you do, Jacob, if you were going to see your friends and you hadn't seen them for a while and you're really looking forward to it, and they say, Jacob, come here, come to our house at 8 o'clock, whenever a party starts, I don't know, maybe 9. You come, we're gonna have a good night, and then you turn up, and maybe not 200, but let's say there's 30, 50 people there, and it is a house party. It's a difficult one because you want to see your friends, people maybe you haven't seen for months, but also you want to be careful. What do you do in that situation?
Well, I certainly wouldn't snitch on anyone. I think that kind of people encouraging people to snitch is really not the kind of society that I want to live in, especially when we know that young people are very unlikely to get particularly ill from this virus. Would I stay? I'd probably try and go outside and where I can be a bit more distance from people. Obviously, I know the rules would obviously tell me to go, but I kind of think they're a bit heavy-handed. Even 3 weeks ago we were allowed to meet 30 people anyway, actually, which I think most people didn't even realise it was that many people you were allowed to meet. But even a few weeks ago, you were allowed to meet 30 people. Yeah,
if you had room to see 30 people. Well, what would you do if you were going to go see your friends and you're really, really looking forward to seeing them, and then this happened?
Well, maybe I just don't have enough friends, but I think I'd just I just don't think I'd go. I mean 30 people. I mean, even if it was above 10, I mean, yeah, it's too much. And the thing is, again, going back to communication and messaging, this again is the government's fault. I mean, they said right at the start of the crisis that young people were invincible and that they had nothing to worry about, and they obviously told us to go out and eat and help out the country and do it for like Great Britain and everything like that. But now they've kind of turned it 180, and now they're blaming us for the rising cases. And I do think that students and young people in general do think that they are invincible. But obviously, just because we get it doesn't mean, like, we might be fine, but we can then give it to an older person who will not be clearly fine from getting it. So it's a difficult one. Like, obviously you want to see your friends, you back at uni, and you want to have that uni experience. But yeah, I think we've just all got to realize that for maybe the next few months, and until there's a vaccine at least, or there's greater testing, we can't have like large parties like that.
And how do you, Will, get young people to take this seriously?
I think it's a mixture. I think a lot of students are taking it seriously. I think young people are, but I think it's a mixture. It's about being consistent with messaging. It's about also maybe helping them with in other ways. Like, I think tuition fees again should be looked at. I think that poor and working class and also people of color should be helped, because it's come out throughout the pandemic that they are more at risk of getting coronavirus. So I think it's got to be a multi-step approach by both universities, local councils, and on top of that, the government. So yeah, it's got to be a wide approach. But I think a lot of young people are on board. I think it's just kind of a few people that obviously are trying to break the rules.
It's a difficult one, Jacob, isn't it? This is my final question to you. How do you think it could be taken a bit more seriously by youngsters?
Honestly, I struggle to answer that one. I really don't know, because as I've seen, young people aren't getting it as badly, and I think people just want to, they've been, young people, as I said, when we weren't as at much risk, did stay indoors and in lockdown for months to protect those more vulnerable. And I think now, especially when I'm walking around in Leamington, it does not feel like we're in the middle of a pandemic still. Apart from some people wearing masks, when I'm just walking around, it does not feel like that. And I think it is really difficult to get people to still be in the mindset of following all the rules.
And it's been wonderful to have you both, and also to have Rose from the Lib Dems on the show today. And well, this is your opportunity to tell someone, Jacob and Will, someone that may be sympathetic to your party, or maybe want to come to your events or learn a little bit more. Let's go to you first, Jacob, and then Will, how people can get involved with your society.
Well, first thing to say is we're not affiliated with the Conservative Party. I had a few people tell me, if we disapprove of the government, can we still join? I was like, I think we all disapprove of how the government's doing generally, not just coronavirus and sort of other areas as well. So obviously, make sure you follow us on all our social medias. We're still running lots of events. We've got lots of MPs coming to speak to us. We're still doing campaigning, which we can do in very small groups. And that's really fun, really nice way to get to meet people, do a bit of exercise as well. And actually get involved in real politics, which is what we really enjoy doing. And hopefully, when things open up a bit more, we can have socials. But obviously, it's a society that I've it's my third year at Warwick, obviously, and I've been in right from the start. I made most of my friends at university, and we are still we're not all mean to boys. We're very welcoming people.
Okay, Will.
No, I'd agree. I check Warwick Labour on Facebook. We've got an event tonight with Zara Zoltana, the local MP, Coventry South. I'd just say come along, join the discussion group, join our events. We're going to be online all through term one for obvious reasons. But yeah, we're very welcoming. And when coronavirus has gone, we'll be back to campaigning. Our work was very important in getting Matt Weston re-elected in Leamington and Warwick last year in the general election. So yeah, come along, and we're very welcoming, very open.
Okay, thanks to you both. We've had a great discussion, and it's great to have a reasoned and balanced discussion. Have a lovely weekend to you both. See you later.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jacob from the Tories, Will from Labour, and of course we had Rose from the Liberal Democrats who joined us a bit earlier in the show as well, and you can find them on social media. Thank you ever so much for watching, for being here, being with me on the Johnny Jenkins Show, which by the way is back next Friday at 3 o'clock. And between now and then, Raw and Raw News has a whole host of brilliant shows on Facebook, on their Mixcloud, etc. We've got loads coming up. So be sure to like Raw 1251 AM on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and to join our groups on Facebook. Just search for Raw 2020-2021, and that's how you can get involved. And if you've enjoyed watching and maybe in the future you'd like to be on a show, join those groups. The opportunity will be on there here in the Johnny Jenkins Show, and we'll see you very soon. Have a lovely weekend.